Mount Rainier rises like a body on its side, massive, white-veined, seemingly asleep. But for centuries, local tribes did not describe it as sleeping. They described it as watching. A glacier-wrapped sentinel, older than anyone could name. Not evil, not cursed, but aware. To the Puyallup, the eastern stretches of forest, near Tipsoo Lake, above the lower alpine bowls, were not for loitering. Especially if fog settled early. Especially if the lake did not ripple when something landed in it. These weren't warnings framed as fear. They were rules, passed down, like prayers. Quiet truths meant to go unquestioned. By 1992, Mount Rainier National Park had grown used to tourists and backpackers. But a season of unusual weather brought fewer visitors that summer. Thicker than usual fogs. Windless days. Trails that held silence longer than expected. Rangers noted glitches in trail cameras. Small items reported missing. Some guests returned early, reporting unusual echoes on the sunrise side. But no one pressed it. Not until July 14th, when Haley Reese, a 26-year-old graduate student from Spokane, signed into the backcountry permit office with a plan to spend 16 days alone, tracking marmot migration between Tipsoo and the Crystal Lakes. A minor project, meant to be quiet science in open space. She told the ranger at the station, "I'm here to collect data. Nothing mysterious." The ranger smiled politely. Stamp. Initial. Welcomed her. But noted later that when Haley turned to go, she paused in the doorway. Quote, "It already feels like the trees are leaning. Which is ridiculous. I just feel noticed, I guess." She laughed after saying it. But the ranger logged it anyway. She was assigned a small research hut 3 miles off the trail, stocked, cold, bare. Built decades earlier and maintained by the Forest Service. 1 window, 1 cot, 1 stove, 1 desk. Perfect isolation. The sort that lets your breathing become the loudest sound. Haley arrived with field guides, camera gear, rolled maps, and a tape recorder. Her first 2 days passed normally. Camera traps set near marmot burrows. Audio logs coherent and focused. She noted chipmunk activity, early berry rot. A cold fog rolled in each evening, common for that altitude. She made personal notes. Visibility drops suddenly in the eastern basin. Sunlight feels clipped. Marmots vocalize normally, but birds shut down just before 6 p.m. That last part struck her, a sudden shift from chattering canopy to nothing, like a held breath. It wasn't cold enough for that behavior. On her 3rd night, she marked something else, quietly, in her journal margin. No wind at all tonight. Trees totally still. Sky clear. It's too quiet. And just beneath that, she added something circled faintly. Heard a whistle. 6:13 p.m. 5 notes. Identical spacing. Too low for bird call. There was no concern yet. No fear. Just a pattern. And if there's one thing untouched wilderness thrives on, it's pattern. But when it begins to break its own, when sound disappears, when light falls wrong in identical places, the human mind starts to listen, even when it doesn't want to. On her 4th morning, Haley radioed in a basic status update. Her voice sounded steady. She asked for 2 more water tablets to be sent to the eastern cache. But the operator wrote something unusual. In her words, there was static, but not from range interference. There was something underneath her voice, like another breath. She didn't report it formally, but she rewound the tape 3 times. That night, Haley documented a new entry. Saw something strange returning to the ridge, a pair of gloves, folded neatly on the edge of my path. Clean. Identical. Not mine. She left them untouched. Marked the spot with ribbon. But when she passed again the next day, they were gone. In their place, 2 pine cones, placed tip to tip like a mirrored shape. She laughed. Lightly. Alone. She tried to whistle the 5-note pattern herself. Then blinked. Because far down the fog-shrouded tree line, something returned the sequence. Delayed by 1 beat. Low and exact. Her field notes over the next 48 hours shifted from tidy to tentative. No birds heard today. Mist set in by 2:30. Whistle at 6:13 again. Same 5 notes. Same silence after. She assumed it was a late-season owl, or even another camper, though her map showed no nearby permits. She asked a ranger by radio. He responded with quiet hesitation. That sounds not on any database recording from this region. Been hearing it myself on patrol. Nothing visual. Just pattern. When she pressed, he added, "You're at Tipsoo, yeah? Don't go near shallow water after 6. Just trust me." She did not trust him. She needed to confirm. That meant returning to the lake. That meant looking into water again. It was on day 6 that she wrote one line. The handwriting uneven. Ink slightly smudged from condensation. "This place feels like it forgets you when you're facing north." She didn't explain it. Didn't have to. On the 7th day, she hiked further into the eastern basin. And what she found on the trail wasn't dangerous. Wasn't even alarming. It was just 2 socks, bright and clean, placed carefully on a fallen log. Waiting. The trail from Tipsoo to the upper basin cuts through dense stands of fir and cedar, steep in places, with occasional flattening rock shelves that offer glimpses of sky. July is not a loud month up there. But it isn't supposed to be silent either. On day 7, Haley Reese wrote, "Fog came early. Birds stopped by 5:45, and I could feel something noticing string markers I hadn't placed." She meant the small red trail loops she used to mark out quick return routes from her motion cams, thin nylon cords tied low on trunks. That morning, she found 5 new ones, tied in the identical knot pattern, further up trail than she'd ever walked. Each one perfectly mirrored her original placement. Same height, same distance. She photographed 2. Removed the others. Told herself a day hiker had passed through. A prank, maybe. But her pack had been locked, and her ribbon spool was still full. On her way back to camp, just before the trail descended toward her cabin outpost, she froze. There, just off the trail, sat 2 socks. Folded. Clean. One balanced lightly on the other. White. Rust-colored heel pads. Not muddy. Not windblown. Placed. She stared down at them for maybe a minute. The wind didn't move. The trees held still like a held breath. She crouched to look closer. Did not touch them. But as she stood again, something shifted across her vision. Not in the clearing. Not in motion. But in depth. Somewhere just inside the tree line, she saw something that wasn't moving with the forest. Nothing dramatic. Just wrong. A shape too smooth for tree bark. Too narrow for a trunk. Too vertical for a shadow. It wasn't inches from her. Maybe 50 feet. Just standing. Deep enough you wouldn't see it unless you were looking for it. Which she hadn't been. She turned her head. So did the shape, with just a fraction's delay. Mirroring. Too precise to be accidental. Not fast enough to be human. She stepped backward. 2 paces. Never fully turning. It didn't chase. It didn't follow. But in her field journal that night, she wrote, "It didn't leave either. It stayed. It was waiting for me to walk first." Back at the hut, she boiled tea with shaking hands. The socks were still in her mind. But not the socks themselves. The gesture. Someone, something, was deliberately choosing ordinary objects. Pairs. Repeating patterns. Quiet ones. She didn't tell herself it was coincidental anymore. Because the pattern was clean. Always 2. 2 gloves. 2 pine cones. 2 socks. 2 shadows once. Hers and something else's. That night, a brief knock of light rain hit the thin rooftop. She opened the window to smell the air. As she did, a low sound returned from the tree line. A whistle. Soft. Distant. The same 5 notes. Spaced by even time. But there was no wind. You shouldn't hear a whistle when there's no wind. You shouldn't hear anything echo that clearly when the forest is still. Haley closed the window without locking it. She didn't realize this until hours later. At 3:11 a.m., she woke up freezing. Her sleeping bag was damp, not soaked. Just subtly cold. The kind of damp you get when mist enters quietly, slow and invisible. The window was latched, but the interior sill was wet. She made no note of it that morning. Not in her journal. Not on her tapes. But she forgot to whistle that day. And that just might have been why it whistled first instead. The language in her notebook changed on day 8. What had been fieldwork jargon became shorter thoughts. Some only half-finished sentences. Moths aren't landing near the lights anymore. Sound doesn't travel east like it did. Tried to record the whistle. Battery drained instantly. I wore the ribbon today without realizing. It was never on my wrist. At one point, she stopped writing entirely and circled part of an earlier sentence. It followed the whistle. Not me. It moved on the sound, not the steps. A ranger was already planning to visit. David Lynn, seasonal ranger observer, had heard her inquiry about the mirrored string markers and offered to drop by. He was quiet. a former forestry student. Superstitious. He arrived mid-afternoon on day 9. Haley didn't tell him everything. Just the whistling. The objects in mirrored pairs. The figure in the trees. He stood silently on her platform porch, arms folded. When she finished, he said, simply, "We tell first years 3 things here. Doesn't always stick, but we say it anyway. 1. Don't follow whistles. 2. Don't touch what's been left in twos. 3. If your shadow lags behind on Sunrise Ridge or moves faster than you do, walk backward to the trailhead. Don't stop. Don't blink." She asked him why flatly. He shook his head slowly and looked out across the pines. "Because this mountain reflects. And sometimes it keeps what it sees." She laughed. Short. Dry? He didn't. When Ranger Lynn left, she watched him walk back into the trees. He faded faster than he should have. Not into light. Into depth. That night, she didn't sleep at all. Instead, she sat at her desk, headlamp on red mode, and recorded 15 minutes of what she thought was silence. What she caught was breathing. Not hers. Soft. Upright. Just behind the east wall. And once, just once, another voice under her breath repeating her last 4 words, slightly too late. Her final journal entry that night ended with something different. A question. What hears us when we hear nothing? Day 10, the rules began to break. The whistle returned later each time. The objects weren't left in twos anymore. Only one, facing outward, waiting to be mirrored. She should have left by now. That's what her notebook suggested. That was what her body wanted. But scientists hold out. They wait. They look again. And Haley, even after what she'd seen, still believed patterns meant data, not danger. On day 10, her recordings grew shorter. Her writing thinner. She whispered more into the mic than she intended. If it's a prank, it's too quiet. Too plain. Too tuned to me. The walk that day was supposed to circle north, loop across the ridge, overlook, and return. But halfway through the loop, she found something else. Not placed this time. Not carefully. Left. Just one hiking boot, toe down in the trail. No sign of another. The laces were pulled all the way out, but coiled beside it. Not chewed. Not dragged. Just arranged. It was size 9. Men's. Same model as hers. She turned to leave. Took 2 steps. Then stopped. Because from behind her came the whistle. 5 notes. Spaced perfectly, but not distant this time. Near. Close enough her sleeve moved slightly. And still, there was no wind. When she turned back, the boot was gone. Only the laces remained. Twisted now, in a shape she didn't recognize. Almost cursive. Almost like it had been watching her watch it. She left the trail then. Not in panic. Just disoriented. Walking back the way she came, but nothing looked familiar. Suddenly, she was at the lake. But there were no footprints in the trail behind her. None. She sat. Not on the bank. Not close enough to see reflection. Just close enough to feel the air change. She took out her notebook and made a list. First whistle. Day 3 gloves. Day 4 mirrored strings. Day 7 socks. Day 8 boot. Today she drew 2 lines between each. Even spacing. Each new object appeared 2 days apart. And each one came within 60 minutes of the same time. Dusk. Until now. Now, the timing was off. The pattern was breaking. And that made it worse. Because whatever was leaving these things had started to change its rhythm. Because of her. She returned to her hunt with a faster pace than usual. Find a trail. Mark the day. Wait it out. But she found something first. A piece of herself. Left where she hadn't left it. Her wool cap. The gray one with red stitching. She kept it in her pack. But now it sat, carefully centered, on the porch railing of her hut. Dry. Clean. Facing outward. Like portion bait. Or tribute. Or reminder. And beside it, carved faintly into the soft cedar rail, 4, scratched in. Almost childlike. Not counted upward. Named. She dropped the hat. Did not go inside immediately. Her bag had been moved. Not ripped. Not looted. Just relocated. Slightly rotated. Tools in a different pocket than she left them. The lantern was still burning. But in the center of her floor, beneath where her sleeping bag had been the night before, a patch of perfectly dry wood. The exact length and width of a person. Everything around it was damp with condensation. This rectangle dry, like it had been occupied during the last mist. She did not sleep. She left the headlamp on. Batteries full. And at 2:47 a.m., her recorder picked up something new. Not breath, not a second voice, but a repetition of her own voice from earlier that day. A moment she remembered recording 2 hours into the hike. Word for word, but played back as if recited. Not replayed, like something had learned it, practiced it, then spoken it. Her words. I should finish the loop today. Peak visibility. I should finish the loop today. Peak visibility. I should finish static. Then silence. When she checked the cabin perimeter at sunrise, there were new markings. Low on the door, about knee height, what looked like faded finger streaks, but there were only 4 on each side. No thumb, too narrow to be hands. If it was a bear, it would have broken the door trying to open it. If it was a person, it would have written more, done more. She left the area that day, straight south, not following the trail, not whistling, not thinking, just walking. The further she went, the louder the forest seemed to grow. Branches creaked. Wind returned. A hawk cried overhead like a clarion she'd forgotten existed. It felt too loud, as if whatever watched her before could no longer hear her this far out, as if the mountain's signal had limits. She stopped at a ranger station 2 miles downroad. Not her assigned one, just the first sign of people. She didn't say, I need help. She asked to speak to Ranger Lynn. The station attendant paused. Quiet. We switched him out late last week. She blinked. Why? I saw him 2 days ago. He looked down at the clipboard. The transfer date wasn't yesterday, or the day before. It was 5 days ago. Lynn had left Rainier altogether. No record of him returning to visit. Haley paused, smiled to herself. 5 days ago, right when the pattern shifted. That night, she returned to her hut one last time. Said she needed to pack her things. No one heard from her for 48 hours. A planner found on her desk had 5 items circled, each one in even spacing. Labeled 1. Listen. 2. Spot. 3. Divide. 4. Wait. 5. Mirror. Nothing else was written inside. Her final mic recording, retrieved days later, ended with only one line. Whispered quietly. Resolute. The first rule is not to follow. But it never said what to do. If it follows you back. She returned to the lake one last time. Not to study, not to listen, but to see something for herself. And what she saw staring back from the water didn't blink when she did. By the time Haley returned to the alpine lake, she didn't think of herself as alone. She wasn't frightened, exactly. Not anymore. But she was watched. Understood. Not by a person. By something shaped by repetition. Noticed by what had been listening for 10 quiet days while she muttered into her recorder. Whispered numbers. Whistled patterns. Questioned shadows. It had listened. All of it. Carefully. And now it had remembered her back. Just before reaching the shoreline, she marked something smaller than usual. Her own boot prints, pressed lightly in the dirt. Several of them. Only, she hadn't come this way yet today. She was sure. She followed them forward, oddly calm. The pattern repeated, looped, then disappeared completely 12 feet from the edge of the water. Like she'd taken one step too many and vanished. The lake was still. Too still. High glacial lakes often gleam with light winds. Lapping ripples. Reflecting sky. But this was unbroken. Glossy. As if covered in glass. The surface did not shift, even when birds wheeled overhead. Their shadows crossed her shoulder. But not the water. She knelt. Not close enough to touch, just enough to see. And there, in the water, was her reflection. It looked like her. Mostly. Same posture, same windbreaker, same brown streak through the hood of her red hair. But it was holding something. A small, white square in one hand that Haley didn't have. Something crumpled. Folded. Slowly unfolding. She leaned closer, and the reflection smiled. Haley didn't. She stumbled back hard onto the trail. Gravel scattered. Breath sucked inward. The water stayed still. Her reflection knelt calmly in the water, but did not follow. It just waited, watching her leave. And the thing in the reflection's hand? It was now clearly shaped like a glove. White. Identical to the first pair she'd seen. Its thumb extended briefly, then folded back into the palm. That night, back in her cabin, Haley tried to sleep without recording. That made it worse. Every corner creaked. Every drawer became a signal. Every blinking LED looked like an eye, unblinking. Her field notes for the day were spare. Only 3 lines had been scrawled across the page. It can hold my shape. It doesn't need my voice anymore. It's learning how to leave something inside me. At dawn, she searched her pack for the mirror she normally used to check sunburn on long hikes. It was gone. In its place, tucked neatly into the same zipped exterior pocket, was a second compass. Identical make, identical features, but the needle wasn't spinning. It was pointing, not north, not magnetic, toward the window, just facing it. Still, permanent, even when turned. She held it for a full minute. The needle never moved, just quietly faced east, toward the lake. She set it on her desk. It clicked once. That night, there was fog again. Sometime around midnight, the motion recorder placed near her hut captured an image, a single, crooked shape stepping halfway into the audio frame. Only the upper body is visible. It's blurry, the resolution too limited. But the posture, the outline, matches one of Haley's own photos taken 3 days earlier. Same stance, same jacket, same high collar, even pulled the same way. But the right sleeve? Empty. Gloved hand missing. The one from the reflection. And the head? Just slightly tilted right, like it had once seen her do. Footprints found at the site the next morning were shallow. Too shallow for a human. A ranger noted that one print had no texture. Not even thread pattern. Just the shape. Like the idea of a shoe, but with nothing in it. Haley didn't bathe that day. Didn't collect data. She stayed inside with the recorder running and one hand slowly covering each mirror in the hut with her towel. She tossed the compass out the window. It was back on her cot by evening. Dry, warm, slightly smudged, just like someone had held it with care. Ranger Lynn did not respond to her next warning call. Someone else did. A new name, new voice. Too chipper. She left no return message. Instead, in her evening tape, dated day 14, she asked a different kind of question. Not scientific, not rational, just intuitive. A whisper, small as breath. What comes out of lakes when they're not lakes anymore? That night, rain fell for 2 minutes, then stopped. Outside, everything went silent again. But through the trees, faint whistling rose once more. The 5-note pattern. Except this time, a second tone joined it. Intervals. Harmony. Call and answer. Same timing. 2 separate voices. Both hers. She closed the final field notebook she would ever write in. On the back page, scrawled upside down, I didn't hear it leave. I didn't see it come in. But I think it has my walk now. At sunrise, her boots were gone. Backpack undisturbed. Notes intact. Recorder missing. The porch bore no footprints. But at the base of the trail, beside the marker post, was a single reflection caught in a water-filled footprint. Upside down. Smiling. The forest stayed still for a full day after that. No clouds moved. No trees sighed. And then, without warning, wind arrived again. From every direction at once. As if the mountain was breathing something back out. On the morning of day 15, the wind returned to Mount Rainier. But it came all at once, without warning, stirring every leaf, every string, every unspoken thing that had been held still the day before. It wasn't cold. It wasn't hot. It just moved. Like an exhale, after hours of breath being held. And as it passed through the clearing where Haley Reese had stood just a day earlier, it carried nothing with it. No footprints. No scent. Just the suggestion that something had stepped away. Or stepped in. A day later, her field cabin was deemed empty but orderly. That phrase appears 3 times in the brief incident log filed by seasonal rangers. Empty but orderly. Her boots were found inside the doorway. Parallel. Rain jacket folded perfectly below the window. Not thrown. Not hung. Placed. A burned tea kettle on the stove. Half a page of writing across her weather log pad. Clouds came fast this morning, south to north. Birds didn't hide. They watched me. 3 sat on one branch. 1 blinked out of sync. That was all she'd written on day 15. Ranger Jonah Taylor, the one who found the cabin, wasn't quick to speak about what he saw. Later, in an off-record conversation, he recalled approaching the hut near sundown. The air felt packed in, he said. You breathe, and it pushes back. Like walking into somewhere that was already full. He walked once around the cabin before entering. He paused outside the west window and wrote in his own notes. Saw someone inside. Back turned. Small frame. Red coat. He knocked once. Heard movement. Nothing more. When he opened the door, no one inside. Just a mild, hollow heat. and something subtle placed on the chair by the window. 2 hair ties. Identical. Thin elastic. Red thread wrapped around one. He took a step toward them. The back door creaked softly open behind him. No breeze. The site was declared non-emergent, which in park language means no sign of incident, no sign of trauma, no immediate cause for alarm. But in the margins of that log, someone penciled something darker. Might be a mirror collar. Watch for symmetry. Watch for doubling. Don't speak at dusk. The motion camera outside the front porch was scrubbed clean. A murky shape was recorded around 2:19 a.m. There was no clear footage, but a sound, pulled from the file later, was verified. A single pair of low whistles. 5 notes. A pause. Then 5 more. Mirroring. 2 exact. And then it stops, not like someone walking away, but like a breath held underwater. What the team didn't realize immediately was the sequence of items left behind. Most assumed she had packed lightly, but an inventory taken a week earlier showed Haley had left with 2 pairs of gloves, 2 spare socks, 1 red wool cap, 1 cracked compass, 1 mirror shard. All were missing. But in their place, as if traded, were a pair of pine needles tied at the stem, 1 child's glove, left-handed, only 2 bootlaces wound like spirals, each item neatly left. Not hidden, not offerings, not threats, only patterns, like responses. And that's the word the anthropology consultant later used when quietly reviewing the incident. This is no longer mimicry. It's not just listening. It's responding. Something is trying to align with human shape, but it doesn't fully understand mistake or motion. So it waits, watches, repeats. There is something subtle about woodland fear. It isn't screeching. It isn't flashing teeth. It's the mountain forgetting your footfall and replacing it with something similar enough. Something unanswered. Her last recorded movement was walking. Seen on camera 5 days later, nearly 2 miles downslope. A figure in Haley's jacket, packed slightly askew. Walk measured, controlled. No badge on the shoulder strap where it used to be. And, as one ranger noted, the figure never raised its arms. Even to balance. Even to climb. It didn't move like a hiker. It repeated the motion of one. By the time they arrived at the trail fork, no one was there. The trail was blank again. No shoe marks. Not even a toe drag. Except for 1 hair tie. Red. Set across the trail sign like a hinge. Later notes indicated this, that the whistle recordings could still be heard, some nights, just before full dark. Same 5-note sequence. Never off pitch. But then a new pattern. Once or twice, over ranger radios, _ a second whistle begins. Faster. Too localized. As if within the mic itself. Same tone. Same voice. And then static. As if the sound didn't come across the channel, but from inside the unit itself. Other hikers have since mentioned something curious, a feeling that their reflection was slightly out of sync when they visited Tipsoo Lake. A few even spoke on tape. It waved when I waved, but I hadn't lifted my arm yet. Another, I whistled the way my brother used to. From childhood, you know, in a circle. And then someone did it back. Same notes, same spacing, but my brother's been dead 5 years. Haley's name is not listed as a fatality. It's listed as missing, presumed unlocated. Status unresolved. Case inactive, but not closed. Because something was returned. Just not enough of her to call it Haley. Sometimes, even now, visitors leave gloves on tree branches near the lake. Not out of tribute, out of superstition. As if they understand, deep down, the forest recognizes patterns. And sometimes one must leave doubles so the forest doesn't ask to take yours. A ascent until they climbed above the tallest ridge line. That they saw something walking below them. Same clothes, same pack, same hair. But something was wrong. It moved just ahead of its own shadow. It was clear by day 16 that something had taken shape. Not just a sound, not just a presence, a rhythm, an image, an attempt. The forest had listened long enough. Now, it was repeating what it had learned. 2 hikers on a sunrise ascent from the northeast ridge reported something strange near the upper Clearwater trailhead. A figure, about a quarter mile below them, wearing a red jacket, carrying a light pack, birthmark or scuff on one boot, hair down. They thought nothing of it, except the way the figure moved. Even on shale, it stepped with no correction, no adjustment, just one foot, then the next, as if walking downhill on glass. One of the hikers later said, she wasn't walking over the trail. She was walking through a pattern she already knew. Not looking down, not watching for rockfall. Just repeating a route that had already been walked. The oddest part wasn't the clothes, or her silence. It was her shadow. Watching from above, they had a clear vantage. The figure was walking east. The morning sun would have cast a shadow behind her. It didn't. The shadow was ahead of her. Not fast, not exaggerated, just misaligned, like an afterimage projected too soon. They blinked, looked again, gone. Only dust kicking up where she'd been. Hovering forward, continuing in silence. The report was filed at the ranger station, logged as possible unauthorized hiker in non-permitted zone. But one staff member, who had helped with the last review of Haley Reese's field equipment, read the description carefully. Red coat, single gait, no arm swing, and that name, Haley, carved into a boot heel seen in the photo. He didn't say anything. He just photocopied the file and slipped it into his coat. That night, he didn't sleep. Said later, that wasn't her. But it walked like it had been her for a while. What happened next was dismissed at first. Audio error, maybe. An automated distress call was picked up on open band channels from a range beacon 2 miles outside the eastern perimeter. Not Haley's frequency, but a match to a fragment from her voice recorder pulled weeks earlier. Words came through, clipped and raw. I lost direction, moved toward my shadow. Wind came after. Then silence. Then, the echo got ahead of me. They traced the signal. No one there. But the soil was warm. The trees had dew. And there, beside a small overlook rail where photographers used to rest packs, was something flattened, a set of kneeling marks. One pair of knees, but no footprints beside them. Only impressions, like a figure had taken shape from pressure, not weight, and sat there, for a long time, watching the sun pass, into its own reflection. Back at Tipsoo Lake, hikers occasionally reported companion sounds. A voice and step behind them. Breathing too closely. Footfalls matching their pace, but never gaining. Most turned and saw no one. A few saw themselves. Not in mirrors, but in puddles, behind tree boughs, in highly reflective sunglasses. One woman reported seeing her own shape pause behind her, long enough for her shadow to hesitate. Then it matched again, long enough to know something had lagged behind, and caught up too late. The phrase began to spread, softly, among rangers, never on reports. Just in shorthand, shadow float. Someone would say it when a hiker returned walking too smoothly, going too quiet. He's shadow floating, they'd say, and no one laughed. In an unlisted ranger journal from that year, someone wrote the following. We all teach hikers to stay on the trail. Turn back early. Don't follow animals. Light fires out. But none of us say the obvious part. Some parts of the trail follow back. One more note. The radios at the Firelook station began picking up strange static in August. Always at sundown. Always the same 5 seconds of noise. Then, on the 7th night, 2 voices. Not in conversation. In synchrony. They said, Haley. Delayed Haley. Same tone. Same length. One shadowing the other. As if something was trying out a voice. Seeing how it fit. Haley was never declared deceased. But she did call her family. Or something did. They received a voicemail weeks later. Heavy static, no service stamp. Cut off at 6 seconds. Only voice heard is hers. Or close to hers. The words are simple. I'm not her shadow, stay. It ends there. One expert confirmed. The voice was almost certainly Haley's. But the cadence was slightly off. She paused after her own name. Like she didn't quite recognize it. The last time anyone officially documented the other Haley was in the late fall. A photographer hiking solo just passed dawn. Clear sky, new snow. He saw a figure on a narrow ledge above him. Red coat. Kneeling. He took a shot. Then looked up again. She was closer. Halfway down the ledge. When he returned and developed the frame days later, she was already crouching at trail level in the photo. Both versions captured at once. People still walk the woods near Tipsoo Lake. But some avoid looking into still water. Others avoid mirrors entirely. And a few hear their own breath when they're not breathing. Some things in the woods are not meant to be found. And others won't appear until you're ready to notice them. Not before. Not after. Exactly when your mind makes room for them to exist. It's been years since Haley Reese vanished. Though vanished is the wrong word. There are photos. There are sounds. There are written logs, still unsigned, still unclaimed, found in dry benches between trail markers. Half written, half listened. And her handwriting shows up now and then, in margins, on notes she never left. In 2004, a solo park volunteer left behind a typed journal of his shift season. In one entry, he described sitting on the porch step of the Tipsoo patrol cabin with hot tea at dusk. He reported, "I heard whistling again. From upslope. Thought it was another ranger joking around. So I whistled back. 5 notes. Same interval. Nothing returned that time. 10 minutes later, he found a pair of thermal socks beside his flask. Still warm. Too warm for an evening that had already dropped below freezing. His own socks, the ones he wore, were dirty, damp, mismatched. Not these. These were rolled as if from packaging. Never worn. Perfect. It wasn't a threat, he wrote. That's the worst part. It felt helpful. In 2006, a trail crew reported seeing a woman crouched in the brush just east of Sheep Lake's ridge line. One of them said, she was squatting, facing away. She looked like she was watching something small in the dirt. I called out, she stood, turned. But it was like the expression was built backwards. Everything on her face matched, but not the way we match faces. Like it was practicing, mirroring, playing human. They started toward her. She didn't move. Blinked once. Tilted her head. 2 full degrees slower than natural. They stopped. Looked down to check footing. When they looked up again, nothing. But where she had been crouching, they found something strange. A folded field report page. Damp. Written in blue pen, in Haley's original documentation code. And signed with initials she never used. The signature simply read, H.R. Alt. No one knew what that meant. Up at Sunrise Visitor Center, off the record, rangers slid a term into casual use, the other kind. It wasn't whispered with fear. Not exactly. If someone said, I saw one of the other kind near Reflection Lakes, the look that followed wasn't panic. It was recognition. Like an old echo had walked past again. Familiar, but imperfect. Because whatever this was, it never approached outright. Never attacked. Never opened the cabin door uninvited. It mirrored. It learned. It adapted. And it always waited to be noticed first. Like it needed the observer to name it before it could fully exist. Like it couldn't be real until a mind allowed it to be. One junior ranger wrote in his orientation journal, I think the forest remembers patterns. Not facts, just frequencies. It doesn't want worship. It wants symmetry. He later left a radio message with 5 seconds of silence, followed by this line. Whatever it is, it waits to be noticed. And the moment you do, it's been watching you longer than you've been alive. Sometimes, that's how the logs read. Found matching gloves. Unknown owner reflection held pose longer than hiker reported 5-tone whistle verified. Unclear source boot print without boot shadow moved too far ahead to belong to identify party, but sometimes, the language is softer. Found her again today standing in the lodgepole pockets just past the lookout smiling waiting didn't get close, but she looked. Closer to Haley this time. And that's where the folklore begins to shift. Because people don't just fear the thing in the tree line anymore. They worry about the look on its face. We keep thinking it looks wrong, one ranger said. But you know what's worse? What if one day it doesn't look wrong at all? Haley has not been found. And somehow, she's never really been missing. Not in Rainier. Not in the places where the wind doesn't move until something watching says it can. She's seen. Sometimes. Heading up toward the ridge at dusk. Standing still in overgrowth. Appearing in reflections a second before her face should. Always among the symmetry. Sometimes she whistles. Sometimes she just waits. And every now and then, rangers say they hear both voices together. The one that was always hers. And the one that's trying to be. The mountain doesn't speak. It listens. And if you offer it enough detail, enough breath, enough motion, enough memory, sometimes it offers something back. Not as it was, but close enough to follow you home. Mount Rainier stands where it always has. Unmoving. Vast. Unblinking. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't give warning. And it never explains what it keeps or why. The official record lists Haley Reese as missing, presumed dead. But her story is not told like a tragedy anymore. It's told like a weather pattern. Something that arrived, lingered, and eventually changed shape. There are still hikers who walk the upper ridges. Still researchers who map marmot activity. Still visitors who sit by Tipsoo Lake and photograph the snowfields reflected across the water. But they don't linger if the surface doesn't ripple. They don't rest alone if the trees have stopped moving. Because anyone who's listened closely to this mountain knows, being alone on Mount Rainier is not the same as being unaccompanied. What happened to Haley isn't rare. What's rare is how quietly it happened. No storm, no crime, no scream in the night. Just patterns. Objects left in pairs. And eventually, something indistinguishable from her own breath existing a half-second behind her. There's a bench below the visitor overlook now. Simple wood. No plaque. Sometimes, a ranger finds items left there. Tied shoelaces, a folded hat, a mirror shard scratched faintly with the shape of a number. 2. Or sometimes, alt. Nothing ever left 3 times. Only in 2s. One summer, a child wandering by the lake approached a ranger to say, "The tree lady whispered when I blinked too long." He said it casually. No fear. He pointed toward the forest, then changed his mind. Shook his head. Pointed toward the water. Another visitor once refused to cross a short gravel path back to the lot. "My reflection got there first," she mumbled. "And it looked wrong. Just enough to ask if I should follow it." The rangers have no rules written about these stories. But they pass them down anyway. You learn them in the quiet hours. When it's just the stove ticking down and fog curling between ridgelines. It goes like this. If your gear appears before you do, don't use it. If the whistling repeats even when you don't whistle, turn around. Don't walk too far after the wind stops. And never speak to your own voice coming from the wrong direction. Seasoned staff don't look into still water anymore. Even quick glances, coffee thermos, camera lens, tram windows, are enough to catch something that might linger. Not upside down. Just too still. Too correct. As if the reflection isn't yours. As if it's someone pretending to be what you've forgotten. The mountain never tried to take Haley Reese. Not in the way people mean. There was no struggle. No dragging. No teeth. Whatever she found, or whatever found her, didn't want to destroy her. It wanted to learn her shape. And once it did, it wanted to keep that shape for itself. In an unlogged recording from 2007, someone hikes through thick brush near the basin. The audio cuts in and out, mostly rustling, breathing. Then, 2 whistles. And a voice says, softly, "You don't need to take all of me. Just what you can carry." Then silence. Then breathing that continues, but without footsteps. The forest doesn't frighten children much. Not here. They chase frogs. They laugh in the alpine gaps. But adults come back differently. People who walked those paths years ago come back and say, "I remember thinking I was alone, and then realizing something had paced me the entire way, like an echo wearing a coat." Or, "The woods were dead quiet until I stopped walking. And then I heard footsteps that also stopped. Not behind me, not ahead, just under the trees, walking slightly out of time." Things still echo at Rainier. But not sound. Behavior. You wave. It waves back. Seconds too late. Then again. Sooner. Then again. Exactly as you would. Until you forget who waved first. The phrase the rangers sometimes repeat isn't folklore. It's not a warning. It's a closing line. A benediction they whisper when the light shifts and the wind stops and a pattern resets. The mountain remembers its silence. Because it does. It remembers sound. It remembers even spacing. It remembers your path, your breath, the whistle you think no one hears. And always, it remembers your shape. If you haven't visited Mount Rainier, you wouldn't understand. You might think the danger lies in storms, rivers, altitude, exposure. But up here, the most dangerous thing is the reflection that waits an extra second. The whistle that comes from nowhere. Or the moment you realize your belongings aren't where you left them, they're where you were last seen. People leave the mountain. Most of them. Not all unchanged. Some come down quieter. A bit slower. Sometimes a little too perfect in their routine. Whistling just the right pitches. Standing just a little too still in photographs. One ranger swears that a returned hiker blinked exactly once in a 5-minute conversation, and only after the ranger blinked first. The case remains officially unresolved. But those close to it say, Haley never disappeared. She just became something that could wait longer than other people stayed. Something still lives in reflection, buried in fog, following boot prints that never need to be made again. The mountain doesn't take things. It keeps what notices it. and it returns what it can whenever it learns how. Sometimes it comes back just a little early. Sometimes just a little late. Sometimes with your face. Sometimes just your walk. Some disappearances are not tragedies. They are echoes. And some echoes do not fade. They walk beside you. If that gave you chills, like the video, share it with someone who sleeps with the lights off, and hit subscribe, or the next photo might have you in it. Tap the bell. The next story drops soon.